Look, I know how this is gonna sound, but I need to get this off my chest because honestly, everyone's acting like I'm the villain here and I'm sick of it. I'm Kira. I'm 27 now, and 2 years ago, I made what everyone calls the biggest mistake of my life, but I'm not so sure about that anymore. So here's the thing. At 22, I had what everyone thought was the perfect setup. I was married to this guy, Trevor, who had some steady job doing logistics stuff for a company. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. We had our little starter house here in Phoenix, a baby girl named Zoe who was absolutely gorgeous. And everyone kept telling me how lucky I was to have it all figured out so young. But you know what? I felt like I was slowly dying inside. Every single day was the same routine. Trevor would leave for work. I'd take care of Zoe, clean the house, make dinner, and wait for him to come home so we could watch Netflix and pretend we were living some great life. Meanwhile, my friends from college were posting these incredible pictures from Miami, hanging out with actual celebrities, going to exclusive parties, dating guys who could actually afford to treat them like queens. And here I was changing diapers and getting excited about a date night at Applebee's if we could find a babysitter. Don't get me wrong, Trevor wasn't a bad guy. He was just so painfully ordinary. He'd come home and tell me about his day, like I was supposed to care about shipping schedules and office drama. He thought bringing me flowers from the grocery store was romantic. He'd suggest we save money for vacation by going camping instead of somewhere actually nice. Everything about our life was just so small and boring. And I started realizing I had settled for the first guy who seemed stable instead of waiting for someone who could actually give me the life I deserved. The worst part was how everyone acted like I should be grateful. My mom would go on and on about how Trevor was such a good provider, how lucky I was to have a man who came home every night. My sister would remind me how hard it is to find a good guy these days, but they didn't understand providing isn't the same as thriving. I was 22 years old and I felt like my life was already over. I started following these Instagram accounts of women living in Miami, and their lives looked absolutely incredible. Designer clothes, amazing restaurants, yacht parties, men who actually knew how to treat a woman right. My friend Jasmine had moved down there after graduation and was dating this music producer who bought her a BMW just because he wanted to. She'd send me pictures from VIP sections at clubs where actual famous people hung out, and I'd look at my life and wonder where I went wrong. Trevor started noticing I was unhappy, but instead of trying to understand, he'd get defensive. He'd say things like, "Isn't our family enough for you? And why do you need all that superficial stuff?" Like, wanting more than a mediocre life made me shallow. He couldn't see that I was suffocating in this suburban bubble where the most exciting thing that happened was a new restaurant opening at the strip mall. The breaking point came when Jasmine invited me to visit Miami for a long weekend. She said I needed to see what I was missing. And honestly, I was desperate for anything that wasn't changing diapers and pretending to care about Trevor's work stories. When I told Trevor I wanted to go, he got all weird about it. He started asking why I needed to party when I had responsibilities at home. Like I wasn't allowed to have fun because I was a mother. That's when I realized he didn't see me as a person anymore, just as his wife and Zoe's mom. I booked the flight anyway, and honestly, best decision I ever made, even if everyone wants to blame me for what happened next. That Miami weekend completely opened my eyes to what my life could actually be. Jasmine picked me up from the airport in this gorgeous BMW that her boyfriend had surprised her with. Not because it was her birthday or anything, just because he wanted to spoil her. That's when I knew I was in a completely different world than the one where Trevor thought surprising me with takeout was romantic. The hotel suite was incredible, overlooking the beach with floor to ceiling windows and room service that actually tasted like real food, not like the chain restaurants Trevor always suggested because he had coupons. Jasmine looked absolutely stunning, designer everything. Perfect hair and nails, that glow that comes from being treated right by someone who actually appreciates you. She kept saying how good it was to see me, but I could tell she was shocked by how dowdy it looked compared to her new life. We went shopping first, and Jasmine insisted on buying me some actual nice clothes because, in her words, you can't hit Miami looking like a suburban mom. I tried to protest, but honestly, when I saw myself in those outfits, I remembered who I used to be before I got trapped in this domestic routine. I looked like a woman who deserved good things, not someone who should be grateful for grocery store flowers. That night, we went to this incredible restaurant where they knew Jasmine's boyfriend by name, and then to this exclusive club with actual VIP treatment, not like the sports bars Trevor would take me to where we'd split appetizers and he'd complain about the prices. This was how successful people lived. And being around that energy made me feel alive for the first time in years. That's where I met Rico. He was this rapper who had just finished performing. And when he walked into our VIP section, every woman in the place turned to look at him. He had this presence that Trevor would never have: confidence, success, the kind of magnetism that comes from actually achieving something in life. When he started talking to me, asking about my life, he listened like what I had to say actually mattered. He didn't interrupt me to talk about himself or check his phone like Trevor always did. Rico told me I was too beautiful to be wasted on some basic life. And honestly, he was right. He said he could tell I was meant for more than whatever small town situation I was stuck in. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without even thinking about it. For the first time in years, I felt like a desirable woman instead of just someone's wife and mother. The rest of the weekend was like living in a completely different world. Every restaurant, every club, every experience was what I should have been having all along, instead of settling for mediocrity. Flying back to Phoenix felt like returning to black and white after experiencing color for the first time. Trevor picked me up from the airport with Zoe in her car seat, and looking at them felt like looking at strangers. He kept asking about my trip, trying to show interest, but his questions were so small and boring compared to the conversations I'd been having. When he suggested we grab dinner at that chain restaurant we always went to, I almost laughed at how pathetic it sounded after the places I just experienced. That night, when Trevor wanted to be intimate, I couldn't even pretend to be present. All I could think about was the difference between settling for someone and being with someone who actually deserved you. Rico had already started texting me, sending pictures from studio sessions and exclusive events, treating me like someone worth staying in touch with instead of just taking me for granted. I knew right then that I had to make a choice, and honestly, it wasn't even close. The next few weeks were torture, pretending everything was normal while I planned my escape from this mediocre life. Rico is texting me constantly, sending pictures from recording studios and exclusive parties, telling me I was too special to waste my time in some suburban bubble. Every message reminded me of what I was missing by staying trapped in this routine. Trevor could sense something was different, but instead of stepping up his game, he got more clingy and insecure. He'd ask who I was texting, where I was going when I needed to run errands. Like, he didn't trust me to live my own life. The irony was that his controlling behavior just proved how right I was to want something better. I started making excuses to go out more: girls' nights, shopping trips, anything to feel connected to something bigger than grocery shopping and diaper changes. Rico would call me during these outings, and talking to him felt like breathing fresh air after being suffocated. He'd tell me about his music, his business deals, his plans for the future, actual ambitions beyond just paying bills, and watching TV every night. The breaking point came when Rico invited me to spend a week in Miami. He said he wanted to show me what life could really be like with someone who appreciated me. I knew I had to make a choice: stay trapped in this small life or take a chance on something real. When I told Trevor I wanted a divorce, he completely lost it. He kept asking what he'd done wrong, begging me to go to counseling, promising he'd change. But that was exactly the problem. He thought this was about him fixing something when really I had just outgrown this entire situation. I wasn't happy and hadn't been for a long time. But he was so focused on maintaining the status quo that he couldn't see I was dying inside. He couldn't understand that I didn't want him to change. I wanted someone completely different, someone with ambition, success, the ability to give me the life I actually deserved. Instead of asking me to be grateful for less than I was worth, my parents were furious, saying I was destroying my family for no good reason. They kept talking about stability and security like those were the only things that mattered in life. My mom cried about how Trevor was such a good man, how hard it would be to find someone better. But they couldn't see that I had already found someone better, someone who saw my potential instead of just accepting me as a suburban housewife. The divorce process was actually easier than I expected. My lawyer helped me get a fair settlement, alimony, child support, and I kept the house since I was the primary caregiver. Trevor was so desperate to keep me that he agreed to everything without much of a fight. I felt bad for him, but not bad enough to sacrifice my happiness for his comfort. Everyone acted like I was being selfish, but honestly, wouldn't it have been more selfish to stay and be miserable? Zoe deserved a mother who was living her authentic life, not someone who was slowly becoming bitter and resentful about all the opportunities she'd missed. The day the divorce was finalized, Rico flew me out to celebrate. We went to this incredible restaurant where the waiters treated us like celebrities, and I felt like I was finally where I belonged. This was what my life should have looked like all along. Being with someone successful who could actually afford to treat me right. I started spending more time in Miami, leaving Zoe with my parents or with Trevor for extended weekends. Everyone acted like I was being irresponsible, but I was finally living for myself instead of everyone else's expectations. Rico's world was everything I'd been missing. Other artists, producers, people who understood ambition and refused to settle for ordinary lives. When Trevor would call about Zoe or try to discuss schedules, his voice sounded so defeated and small. Part of me felt sorry for him, but mostly I felt relieved that I'd escaped before wasting any more years on someone who would never be enough. Living the Miami lifestyle turned out to be more complicated than I'd imagined, if I'm being completely honest. Rico was incredible when we were together, but he traveled constantly for shows and business meetings. I spent more nights alone in hotel rooms than I'd expected, waiting for him to finish work or wondering when he'd be back from whatever recording session was running late. The other women in his circle weren't exactly welcoming either. They had this competitive energy, always sizing each other up and making subtle comments about who belonged and who was just visiting. I tried to fit in, but there were all these unspoken rules about how to dress, how to act, what to say around certain people. Back in Phoenix, at least I knew how to navigate my social circle. When I'd call Rico feeling lonely or uncertain, he'd tell me that's just how the industry worked and I needed to be more independent. He wasn't wrong, but it stung that he couldn't understand how isolating it felt to be in a new city where I was basically just someone's girlfriend instead of my own person. Meanwhile, Trevor kept sending me pictures of Zoe at her activities, soccer games, dance recital, school events. He never made me feel guilty about missing them directly, but seeing those photos hurt more than I wanted to admit. Zoe started asking when I was coming home permanently, and I had explained that I was building a better life for both of us. Rico and I did have some amazing moments, red carpet events, incredible trips, meeting actual famous people. But between those highlights, there were long stretches where I felt more disconnected than I ever had in Phoenix. At least there, I had my own house, my own routines, people who actually knew me beyond just being someone's plus one. The lifestyle was expensive too. Even though Rico covered most things, I felt constant pressure to always look perfect, have the right clothes, know the right people. In Phoenix, I could just be comfortable in my own skin. In Miami, everything felt like a performance I wasn't sure I was nailing. I started noticing that Rico had a lot of female friends who would text him at all hours. When I asked about it, he'd say they were just business contacts, but some of those conversations seemed pretty personal for work relationships. He'd get annoyed if I questioned him about it, saying I was being insecure and jealous like Trevor used to be. But the difference was Trevor questioned me because he cared about losing me. Rico seemed annoyed that I cared enough to ask questions at all. That realization hit harder than I wanted to admit, but I pushed it down because I'd given up too much to turn back. Now, 6 months in, everything started falling apart in ways I never saw coming. Rico became distant, always busy, constantly having excuses for why he couldn't spend time together. I'd see him posting on social media at events where I wasn't invited, with other women visible in the background of his stories. When I finally confronted him about how disconnected we'd become, he said I was being too clingy and that he'd never promised me exclusivity. Those words hit me like a physical blow because I had literally destroyed my entire life thinking we were building something real together. That's when I found out through Jasmine that Rico had been seeing multiple women the entire time we were together. Apparently, everyone in his circle knew except me. I was just another rotation girl, completely replaceable. While I'd been telling everyone back home about my upgrade and my amazing new relationship, I felt so incredibly stupid and used. All those months, I'd been posting glamorous photos and talking about my new life. And the whole time, I was just another temporary distraction for him. The worst part was that I'd sacrificed my marriage, my stability, my relationship with my daughter, all for someone who saw me as completely disposable. Coming back to Phoenix was humiliating beyond belief. I'd been so vocal about my new life, so confident that I'd made the right choice, and now I had to face everyone, knowing it had all fallen apart, exactly like they'd predicted it would. But the real shock was finding out that Trevor had moved on. He was dating someone from his workplace, this woman named Sarah, who was younger than me, prettier than me, and according to every mutual friend, absolutely perfect for him and amazing with Zoe. Seeing them together at school events was torture because she looked at him the way I used to, and he looked genuinely happy in a way I'd never seen during our marriage. My parents tried to be supportive, but they had this underlying, we told you so energy that made every conversation feel like a lecture about poor choices and consequences. My friends back home had moved on with their lives while I was playing house in Miami. And I felt like a stranger trying to fit back into a world that had continued spinning without me. And the house felt empty and depressing after all the excitement I'd experienced. Going from penthouse suites and five-star restaurants back to my little starter home and chain restaurant options was honestly devastating. I started spending way too much time scrolling through social media, checking Rico's profiles obsessively to see what I was missing. He'd moved on to some Instagram model who was everything I wasn't. Younger, more connected in the industry, probably less demanding and needy than I'd been. Watching them together online was like watching someone else live the life I thought I deserved. I'd also find myself checking Trevor's girlfriend's Facebook page, hating how perfect their little family looked with my daughter smiling in their photos. Sarah seemed to effortlessly be everything I should have been: supportive, engaged, happy with a simple life that I'd found suffocating. The isolation was crushing, but admitting I'd made a mistake felt impossible when I'd been so confident about my choices. 2 years later, I'm still sitting in this same house, collecting alimony and working part time at some office where I basically just answer phones and file paperwork. It's mind numbing, but honestly, it's all I can handle right now because my confidence is completely shot. Rico's engagement to that Instagram model was all over social media last month. She gets everything I thought I deserved: the public relationship, the real commitment, the partnership I convinced myself he'd eventually want with me. They just bought some incredible house in LA. She's pregnant now, getting the whole package I sacrificed my marriage for. Meanwhile, Trevor married Sarah 6 months ago in this beautiful ceremony where Zoe was the flower girl, looking absolutely radiant in photos. I definitely shouldn't have been stalking online. They bought a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood, and from what I can see, Sarah's everything I never managed to be content with, building a life instead of always wanting more. The worst part is how happy Zoe is with them. She barely asks to stay with me anymore. And when she does visit, she talks nonstop about Sarah this and Sarah that. Sarah helps with homework. Sarah makes the best pancakes. Sarah taught her how to braid friendship bracelets. I've become the weekend mom in my own daughter's life, watching someone else be the mother I was supposed to be. My friends treat me like a cautionary tale now. They're all married with kids, living their suburban lives that I used to judge so harshly, and I'm the single one who had it all and threw it away for nothing. They don't say it directly, but I can see it in their eyes when they talk about their husbands and families. They act like I should have been grateful for what I had, but none of them understand what it felt like to be suffocating in mediocrity. I still follow Rico on Instagram because honestly, I can't help myself. His life looks absolutely incredible. Grammy nominations, sold out international tours, that perfect relationship with his fiance who seems to effortlessly navigate his world in ways I never could. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd been more patient, more understanding of his lifestyle, less needy about wanting commitment and security. Trevor's doing amazingly well too. He got promoted to some management position and he and Sarah are trying for a baby now. It's like both of them took everything they learned from being with me and became better versions of themselves for other people. They erased me from their success stories and flourished without me. Everyone's moved forward except me, and I'm stuck here in this house that reminds me of everything I walked away from. People keep telling me I need to focus on myself, maybe try dating again. But honestly, I'm exhausted from searching for something that clearly doesn't exist for me. At 27, I feel like my life is essentially over while everyone else is just getting started with theirs. The worst part is knowing that I did this to myself, but I can't even admit that out loud because then everyone would feel justified in saying they told me so. So here I am, still checking my ex-husband's wife's Facebook page and my ex-boyfriend's Instagram stories, watching other people live the lives I convinced myself I deserved, while I sit alone in a house that's supposed to represent my independence, but really just reminds me of everything I lost trying to find something better.